Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. Thanks for tuning in to today's show. I want to welcome one of our new members. Dan Freeman owns Focal Point Coaching in Hudsonville, and Dan recently became an elite member of SBAM. He actually came to us originally through our strategic partnership with the Granville Jenison Chamber of Commerce. So thanks to Dan for becoming an elite member and welcome aboard. All right, we're going to start out today's show with a discussion on one of the few policy issues currently being debated alongside the budget, and that's this new incentive package. We've covered the details of this package on previous briefings, but Brian, what I want to ask you about today is a new in-depth report from Bridge about this package and how it compares to previous years.
Yeah, so we have talked a lot about the proposals, research and development tax credit and the goods jobs package, and the way that that changes the economic development incentive landscape from before. But Bridge did a really nice recap of everything that happened in 2023, and I thought it would be a nice juxtaposition to our to what's being proposed today. Because really, when you consider all these things together, it doesn't seem frankly, this doesn't seem like as good a deal as what they do. And the press announcements, you have one at a time, and it's a big deal in a particular area. Here's a new investment. Here's how many jobs, that sort of thing. But when they put it all together in 2023, corporate incentives that paid out by the state under the new programs or the newish programs came to $335 million. Keep in mind, a lot of times they'll announce a big number and it's a multi-year thing. So $335 million in corporate incentives paid out in 2023. The there were 83 companies that received them. So 83 companies. On average, it was 11,000, or I'm sorry, the total amount of jobs in all of these packages were 11,408. Okay, so $335 million among 83 companies for 11,408 jobs. The average that those jobs paid was about $50,000 a year. So 11,000 jobs at 50,000 a year. But if you do the math on the number of jobs and the incentives paid, you'll see that it was $29,000 in incentives per job. And so that's over half. It'd be one thing, 29,000 for jobs that paid higher, but that's a really, really big subsidy. And then 4 in 10 jobs created by the incentives pay less than the state's median base wage, which is 45,510. So I thought this was pretty insightful, and it really does indicate why there is such a need to change the way that these incentives work, because such a big incentive to create jobs that are average or less than average of what's already available in Michigan, of course, is not the type of return that that taxpayers would expect that they're getting in these sorts of things. And so these changes that are being proposed are really looking to transform it so that I think just the costs and the return for incentive is different and better. And then of course the other big change is that we were looking for is that they should lower the number of jobs that get somebody, if you're going to do incentives, to lower the minimum number of jobs that qualify, so that smaller companies can be a part of it. And here's what I think will happen is that you'll have more diversity by making changes. You'll end up getting more diversity than the systems that have small number of companies with a big number of jobs, and that ends up being very average or even below average wages. You go with smaller companies, you might have fewer jobs, but per entity, but more jobs overall, more diversity in the economy, more resiliency in the economy. Just small businesses, is what the old saying goes, the backbone of the economy. Well, I mean, it really is though, and that's the um, and so these I think that the recap Bridge did of the 2023 incentives, I think really illustrates why it would make sense to add more diversity and get smaller, to really focus on smaller businesses as opposed to just the big ones.
All right, good analysis. Thank you. Let's talk now about reports from the Auditor General. So we've covered reports from the Auditor General over the years, but the governor has proposed a 28% reduction in the current budget. So why does this matter to our members?
There's so many times when we have reported on issues that affect small businesses and things that need to be improved. And the place where that comes from is the state's auditor general. And this is a position within the legislature. So the legislature hires an auditor general. There's a staff, and their job is to make sure that laws are being faithfully and effectively implemented according to the law. It's a long-standing office that here in Michigan, and it's one of the ways that we know what's really going on inside of state government. I can tell you from personal experience that every governor feels like the auditor general is picking on them. Just how it is, because the auditor general office is, I mean, they are very, very meticulous. They get deep into every single issue, and they just put it out there the way that things are. And it's it can be a difficult process. I know that when I was in office, the it was, when those, you had to kind of brace yourself for these auditor general reports, because if there was any problem anywhere in there, they would find it and they would, publish it. And the last few years, I think there has been some wariness among the administration with the auditor general, and just the unemployment system, and a series of audits out of there and a few other places. And but normally, see, this is part of the legislature's budget. So you got the governor's office budget, the legislature's budget, the Supreme Court's budget. Not to say all courts, but just those kind of like front office operations. And there's normally each branch does not question how the others operate or what the others are looking for. And so everybody can kind of just have what they need in order to do their job right. So like the idea that of the governor proposing a cut to a legislative office is unusual. And in this case, I think it would be a big mistake for the legislature to accept this cut in the Auditor General's office. SPM doesn't normally, there are not too many spending items that we take positions on, that we get involved in, because we represent taxpayers, not the ones who usually receive taxpayer dollars, but the ones who pay taxes. And so we don't really get involved in a lot of the appropriations debates in state government. But the but this is one of those areas where we have so much of our work and our priority setting is based on Auditor General findings and reports, so that we can know, okay, this is working okay, and this needs some improvements. It's informed by that work. It's really, really important for the public. It's important for our association and our members, and also for the legislature, to make sure that the laws that they pass are being faithfully executed. So I think really this will be one of the ones that, one of the proposed cuts um, uh, that probably gets reversed and restored as it goes through the process. But one, I just wanted to kind of make the connection that when we're sharing information and have a lot of confidence in what we're sharing, over the last several years, Auditor General reports has been a very, very consistent piece of that landscape, and one that we'll definitely want to see preserved.
All right, thank you for that. Let's talk next about the Friday announcement that Michigan Supreme Court Justice David Viviano will not seek re-election. So tell us maybe what's next. What does this announcement entail?
Typically what happens is there are two justices that are up every 2 years. And And so that would have normally included David Viviano, a current justice of the Supreme Court. And then in this case, there's a partial year from an appointee from Governor Whitmer's last appointment um, that will be up to. So two different positions up for election. I think most observers thought, because David Viviano is a relatively young person, that he would be running for reelection, but he has decided not to. And so what it means is that one of the two seats is an open seat. And as if you're following if you have followed our discussions and politics over the last several years and cycles, you'd know that um, the Supreme Court, the Michigan Supreme Court, which has 7 justices, these justices are nominated by political parties or appointed by governors when there's vacancies. Um, the um, the balance has shifted. So Democrats have 4 nominees in the Supreme Court, Republicans have 3. And David Viviano would be one of those that is nominated by the Republicans. So this really does, it opens up the door for a nominee of the Democratic Party to strengthen their majority on the court. And no question that they have more success in recent election cycles than have Republicans. So this does make a seat that normally would not have even been in play, wouldn't have been on many people's radar screens, because in Michigan, when you run as an incumbent for judge, it has on there that you're the incumbent running. And so it'd say like David Viviano, Justice of the Supreme Court. That designation is usually enough for a person to get elected, because people don't know a lot about the justices otherwise. In this case, though, that means it's open, and it will be this. It went from being kind of an election that people wouldn't have paid much attention to one that there's going to be a lot of attention paid to. So there was a state representative that already had announced for the other seat, taking on an incumbent. That his name is Andrew Fink, a state representative lawyer, is going to run for Supreme Court, but also an appellate court judge has already announced. Mark Boonstra is his name, and Boonstra is definitely similar to David Viviano. But that will be a very, very contested race. There haven't those that would likely seek a nomination from the Democratic Party. It's too fresh. Nobody's has popped up and announced yet. But I expect that you will see that go from being a race that not very many people were paying any attention at all, to being one of the most watched races in Michigan. Actually, I should kind of check that. The presidential race is going to make everything else seem small, because that's going to be, Michigan's going to be ground zero for that. But in terms of state offices, this will be a very, very critical election, and one that I expect that both sides will go very, very hard at. It's not too often that you get a totally open Supreme Court race.
All right. Last Monday, you indicated that we were looking for quite a few data points to be released last week. And so I think you've prepared a robust Data Monday for us today.
Yeah, I'm going to share with you a presentation that mainly we're going to look at inflation, because that was the most important thing that came out. Spent a little bit of time on that, and you might have to move your the window around a little bit. Hopefully you can see the data on the right hand side. But basically, as inflation came out, remember that you have headline inflation, consumer price index, that came in at 3.2%. That's the blue line that you see on this graph. And then in orange, you see that core inflation, which removes energy and food from the calculation. So you see that core inflation is a little higher, and CPI is at 3.2. And as you see that, like both of those things were coming down pretty sharply. but are now kind of flattening. They're coming down more slowly or kind of flattening out. And this is where you see that frustration um, by the Federal Reserve, or this cautious approach to say, boy, they really hoped that this number would have kept on dropping, and they would be looking at reductions in interest rates. But because it seems to have kind of like stalled a bit at this level, which is still, quite a bit higher than what they would want to see it at 2%, almost double on the core inflation, that that is reason enough to project that there will be no interest rate cuts in the first half of the year. So looking at it month by month, you can tell a little bit more why there would be some concern, because the if you look at the headline inflation, again, it was like really, really low, but it's been kind of ramping up. So it's not like high. Annualize the number, it's not like it's high compared to a few months ago, but you don't like to see the trend going in that way when you look at month by month. And on core inflation in the yellow down below, you see that it's not quite as dramatic an increasing trend, but definitely an increasing trend. So when you compare it, to previous years, it looks lower than it was, but not when you just look at the last 6 months. It looks like it's increasing. Looking at a couple of different areas, where inflation is higher or lower, you'll see that this is monthly. This is a monthly number, so 0.4% is the average of everything. But you see some areas, dairy and dairy-related products and fruits and vegetables, where there's actually a bit of deflation, so prices came down a bit. But yeah, the types of things that everybody feels, kind of more in your face with the way people pay attention to gasoline. Gasoline, airfare, natural gas, fuel oil, all of those being up and up, fairly substantially. Again, especially when you consider that these are just monthly numbers that we're talking about here. Also, the monthly NFIB, or the National Federation of Independent Businesses, their national survey that comes out monthly. I like to share this monthly. We do one here, just Michigan businesses, but we do it quarterly. But I thought this was notable. They have a bunch of different indexes, but I just wanted to share with you that the single biggest problem graph shows a decline in quality of labor concerns. You notice that's in the yellow. So you see that was for a little while the highest concern, the highest problem that business owners were reporting. And you see that kind of fell off. And at the same time, what went up? Well, inflation. So what this tells me is that what the federal government is concerned about, that inflation kind of stalled out where it is, but small businesses are saying, wait a minute, this, I'm growing a little more concerned about this. Big warning sign as far as I'm concerned, because I think small businesses feel and see these things before everybody else. And then, and you'll also notice, not surprisingly, cost of labor as being one of the biggest problems that people are facing. While it's still the fourth out of these, you can see that it's gone up. That's the red line. So pretty big change here from quality of labor giving way again to inflation, which had been the top issue for quite some time. So looking at this next chart, the optimism in the outlook index, another one from the NFIB, and this will be the final one that I'll share today. You'll see that both of those are, if you look, especially if you look back in the last several years, you'll see just generally optimism and outlook, both pretty substantial downward trend. This is not a percentage, it's an index. So you see that, in the 2018-19 timeframe, these were both at really high levels, and then both had fallen off, of course, pretty substantially through the pandemic. And so while there's been a little bit of recovery, not a lot. And in fact, in the most recent survey, actually a bit of a decline again. So um, this actually fits our survey data here in Michigan as well, where we do see generally declining confidence and optimism among small business owners. So several things to really pay close attention to that I would call, not like alarm bells, but warning signs that what NFIB is seeing nationally and what SBAM is seeing here locally is that entrepreneurs are just not as confident. Their confidence is waning, and and it and then on top of that, the inflation numbers are just they're just kind of stuck where they're at, or maybe even increasing a little bit. And if that's the case, I think if that little bit of an increase turns into like an undeniable trend of upward, even if it's a modest trend upward in inflation, I think it's really going to erode confidence even more, because what it will do is force the Federal Reserve's hands to be even more aggressive on trying to tamp down inflation, which will make the cost of capital go up. So there's some concerns here. You remember at the end of last year, it seemed like everything was kind of like going in the right direction, and it just seemed like a really, really optimistic time at the end of last year, and in terms, at least in the economic data, and October, November, and heading into December, and since then, it just really, you can feel it among the small business community that there's just less confidence that things are heading in the right direction, and among the Federal Reserve, more kind of pulling back, more apprehension about establishing expectations for interest rates cuts anytime in the future, in the near future.
All right, well, thanks for the report. I know you'll be keeping everyone up to date with future Data Monday presentations. So before we do say goodbye today, I want to remind everyone we're hosting a webinar on Wednesday. It's about strategic streamlining and process improvement. So I think it'd be a really great opportunity to learn some new tips. You can register at sbam.org/events. Even if you aren't able to make it live, if you register, you'll get first dibs at the recording and the slides. So go ahead and register, even if you're not able to join us live. And then we're looking into April here, but I know people start to get busy and calendars fill up. On April 9th, we will be at Consumers Credit Union, former sponsor of the show, our friends at Consumers Credit Union. They're hosting us here in Lansing on April 9th at 4:30. So if you're a business owner in the Lansing region, we'd love to see you then. And a reminder that we are always adding new events, either in person or webinars on our website. So bookmark sbam.org/events and stay up to date. We hope you have a great week. We'll be back here Thursday at 3 p.m.
See you on Thursday, everybody.